Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen, an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple of different reasons. The first of which is to take my brain out of the mode of background work over the course of the week and move into the process of actually writing and preparing the sermon that I will preach to my congregation for the weekend. That is reason number one. And reason number two is just to allow you, the viewer, who have come across this video for whatever reason brought you here today, whether you are a regular weekly viewer or if you just happen to stumble across this one, you're like, hey, what's this? To gain some different insight into the assigned text for the week. So that is why I do these. This particular Sunday, March 31st, 2019, the end of March, Holy Smokestack, the fourth Sunday of Lent. Our gospel lesson comes out of Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 3, and then 11b through 32. This is parable. If you've heard me talk about parables before, you might be familiar with the fact that parables are not my favorite thing to preach on. I think they are wonderful bits of scripture, but they are really hard to preach on. For me, personally. Others might not think so. But this is arguably one of the best known parables within Scripture, and it is commonly known as the parable of the Prodigal Son. Now, personally, I don't think that's a real great title, but that's what it's typically known by. This is one of those parables that's kind of become synonymous with within popular culture, the idea of being a prodigal son, someone who wanders off and then comes back later on. Arguably, the other parable, we'll go on this brief tangent, that is probably as well known or is the parable of the Good Samaritan. But that's not the one we're on today. So this particular passage is quite long. I'm not going to actually read it here on the video like I normally do, just because it's pretty lengthy and that will take a fair amount of time. So I'm going to invite you to look it up. Again, it's Luke 15, 1 through 3, which introduces and then picks up at 11b through 32. That's the actual parable itself of the prodigal. And so I'm going to invite you to put this on pause and go read it. So pause. And now we're back because you've read it. Okay, wonderful. So one thing I will say, because I think it's important for setup, is I am going to read the first three verses. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable, and it goes on. Now, excuse me. That, I think, setting is important because it really sets the stage for what comes next. Now, the prodigal, or this particular parable, it's one of three parables. Now, this is the longest one, to be sure, but there are two other parables that kind of seem to make the same type of point. It's the parable of the lost coin and the parable of the lost sheep, if you're familiar with those. If not, the lost sheep, it basically goes, there's a shepherd who's got 100 sheep and he discovers one's missing. So he leaves the 99 and goes and finds the one, and he searches high and low, and when he finds it, he carries it back and he calls all of his neighbors together and they have a celebration because what was lost was found. The lost coin is a woman who has 10 coins and she loses one somewhere in her house, and so she searches diligently high and low, and she cleans and she searches and searches and searches until she finds it, and then she calls all her neighbors together and she has a celebration to celebrate that what was lost was found. Interestingly enough, there's a cost to that because she probably had to spend one or more of those coins to celebrate having found the lost coin. But that seems to be the sensibility that we get into with these parables. Now, in the lengthy one of the prodigal, we have some things that happen. There's a man who has two sons, seems to be a wealthy landowner, has two sons. The younger one basically is to the point where he wants to go out and just be wild and crazy. And so he comes to his dad and he says, "Hey, I want my inheritance," which is the same as the equivalent of saying, "You're dead to me, give me your money." So he takes his inheritance and he goes off into a foreign land and spends it in what we hear dissolute living. Well, what's that mean? Well, who knows? But he goes off and he frivolously squanders all of this inheritance. And then he ends up in a situation where he's having to work and it says that he basically has to go out and feed the pigs. And if this is a Jewish audience, pigs are unclean, so that would be perhaps an affront to him. but he gets no food, and he wishes that he could eat what the pigs get. And then all of a sudden he comes to himself and he's like, my father's servants eat well. They're taken care of. I'm not worthy to be a son, but I'm going to go back and ask if I can be one of the servants. So he goes back. And the important part here is that the father is looking for him. This is a difference from the other two parables in that the father is not actively seeking for him, but he is out looking for him, so that while the son is still far off, the father sees him and runs to him, forsaking all matters of decorum, because the head of the household would never run, and yet he scoops up his robes and runs to meet his son. That he's so overjoyed, and he restores his son. And they have a celebration. They have cause for celebration. They go out and he says, this is about midway through, get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to celebrate. Now, what makes this odd, we could stop the story right there, and it would kind of still have that same thrust that we have from the earlier two parables, the shorter two. That when that which is lost is found, it's worth celebrating. And it's not just worth celebrating for that individual, but bring the community together. This is something communally we should celebrate. However, this particular parable doesn't stop there. And we hear about the older brother who's out in the field working diligently, and he hears this commotion as he's coming towards the house. He's wondering what's going on. And so he asks one of the servants, hey, what's happening? And he says, well, your younger brother is back. Your father has restored him, and we are celebrating. And the older son gets all ticked off. And he's like, well, I'm not going in there. I've done what I'm supposed to do. I have served diligently. And dad comes out to him as well. Dad comes seeking for him because he hasn't come into the celebration. And says, and the older son complains, basically saying, at least kind of as I understand it, it's like, I've done all the right stuff. I've followed the rules. I've earned it. Where's my celebration? And the father says, don't you understand that you're always with me? All that I have is yours. Like, you're already a part of this. But your brother, we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He has been lost and is now found. Now, and that's where the parable ends. Now, what's going on here? You know, that's kind of always the big question when we ask in parables is, what is this revealing to us? Because parables are intended to reveal something specific. Oftentimes we'll also, sometimes in big circles, we'll call things allegories. Like, does this stand for something? Are we supposed to take this story and these characters and this setting and apply it to something else? And some people will tell you, no, don't do that. Others will say, yeah. I kind of fall in the latter category, because it's like, okay, what does this reveal to us? And I think this reveals a lot. Earlier this week, I was meeting with other pastors in text study, which I do almost every week. And we were talking about this passage and really trying to figure out, what is this revealing to us? Who is this about? And it can be about a lot of things, and what it reveals to me might be different from what it reveals to you, and what it reveals to me next year might be different than what it reveals to me today, and so on and so forth. But what do we get from this? What can we think? Like, are we the younger brother, the ones who wander away from God, from faith, and then come back and find that God is waiting for us? Maybe. Is God the Father? Maybe. Is the church the father? Maybe. Is the church the younger brother? Maybe. Is the church the older brother? Often. Yeah. Are we the older brother? Yeah. Are we the father? Maybe. There's so much going on here. It's what do we make of it? And I think in any given moment it might be different for us. But what I really grab onto, I'm looking up at my noteboard in case you ever wondered. I don't know if I've ever shown it to you. You see, I have a whiteboard that I put up there where I just keep notes through the course of the week. So oftentimes when I'm filming these videos, I look up there and kind of refresh my memory about what I'm thinking about. But I got to catch my attention again. So going all the way back around, Jesus is criticized for the people that he hangs out with by what I call the religious elite. I think it's worth noting, the text does say the Pharisees, and oftentimes I think in Christian circles the Pharisees get a bad rap as considered the bad guys. There's arguments to be made that Jesus himself might have been a Pharisee, and that he was debating on what direction is this faith movement going. So that's worth noting, but it's essentially, it seems like he's being criticized for the company that he keeps, that he's keeping time with sinners. And I kind of raised the question earlier this week of what is Jesus doing? If all three of these parables, the prodigal plus the other two, are about the fact that when the lost is found, it is worth celebrating within the community, what is Jesus doing? Is Jesus already celebrating with those sinners? Is he seeking them? And I don't know. I'm not proposing one way or another, but that's something that I think about. Like, is we hear about there's other parts of the Gospels where Jesus basically says, we must celebrate now, for the bridegroom is here. And so is that what he's doing? Jesus was seemingly well known for the way he shared time with people, often over a meal or in periods of celebration that seemed to be very important to Jesus. And so is that what he's doing? Is he celebrating? Is he at the party? Is this whole thing the celebration? And is the life to come that we are promised through the resurrection, is that the party? And I think it's both. And so one of the things that I'm really going with, as I think about all this, is the invitation into the celebration. That seems to be what the Father is doing. The Father is creating the celebration, inviting the Son into it. There's that period of restoration, or not period, but the sense of restoration for the younger son. But he's also inviting the older brother to come and be a part of it as well. And does this indicate to us that the celebration is already ongoing? We can make the choice to act in a way that excludes us from it, or we can be a part of it. We can be included in it. But the invitation is already there. It's already given to us, and the party is already going on, both now and not yet. It's that whole thing that we talk about, the kingdom of heaven. It's both here among us now and also in the age to come. But we're all invited, and I think that's really the direction that I'm going with this particular one. Now, in addition, I've got baptisms this weekend in my congregation. I've got a set of twin girls who will be baptized, which is super exciting. And this idea that one of the things that we profess in at least in the Lutheran circle for baptism is that it is the acceptance into the community of faith. So we can maybe see that sense, that similar sense to what's going on in the parable, that celebration is happening and they are coming into it, that we are gathering to celebrate the restoration that they are given when they are claimed and given the promise that they are beloved children of God. That's a similar situation to this, but as I think about this whole celebration thing, one more aspect that I want to bring up, and this is a point to ponder. I'm not saying that this is the only way to think about this, but this is something that I heard this week and it really captured my attention. So if we think about the celebration within the story, what had to happen before that celebration could happen? Well, the Father said, get the fatted calf and kill it. So the calf had to die before this celebration was possible. And when we think about the celebration of being within the kingdom of heaven, that it's both here and also in the age to come, who had to die for that to happen? And it's Jesus. Jesus had to die. So is Jesus the calf in this story? Maybe. We can read it that way. And so that's something that I'm thinking about, that at least if we think about the parable, that for the celebration to happen, someone had to die. And for the celebration that we share, the joy of that through Christ, all is being made new. And we're invited into that. Someone had to die for that too, and that's Jesus. To make this reconciliation between the divine and the world possible. That's where I'm the direction that I'm going with this sermon and kind of the things that I'm thinking about. If you have thoughts, questions, comments, throw them down in the comment section. We'll continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, something I've been doing now, if you know, these videos are an outreach that I am allowed to do by the congregation that I serve. And if they are a blessing to you, if they are something that you feel is worthy of supporting, I will put a link to my congregation's website down in the comments section, and you can follow that link and find the online donation page if you would like to help support the ministry that allows me to do these. No pressure to do that one way or the other, but if you feel so led, it would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, I hope you have a blessed week, and we will catch you next time.